At 11:37 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in Atlanta, a black woman in a simple sundress was handcuffed and arrested in front of a luxury jewelry store, while bystanders recorded everything on their phones. The store manager was screaming at police that she was a shoplifter, that she didn't belong there, that people like her were ruining his business. Security guards were restraining other black customers who had tried to defend her. The scene was chaos, humiliation, and raw hatred captured in high definition and uploaded to social media within minutes. But here's what those videos couldn't show. What nobody in that crowd knew as they watched this woman being dragged away in handcuffs. Her name was Dr. Amelia Washington. Her husband Marcus had just sold his tech company for $12 billion, making her one of the wealthiest black women in America. The canvas bag they accused her of using to steal jewelry? It contained her MIT PhD diploma, patents worth hundreds of millions, and a single business card that would destroy everyone who had humiliated her. Because exactly 18 minutes after those handcuffs clicked shut, FBI agents stormed that same jewelry store. 23 minutes later, every employee was under arrest. 31 minutes later, the store was permanently closed. And by the end of that day, a federal investigation would uncover a criminal conspiracy so vast, so systematic, and so deeply rooted in racial hatred that it would bring down an entire retail empire and send its executives to federal prison for decades. This is the story of how 20 minutes of recorded humiliation triggered the largest civil rights investigation in retail history, exposed a multi-state criminal conspiracy, and proved that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone underestimates. What happened next would change not just one woman's life, but force an entire industry to confront the devastating cost of judging people by the color of their skin. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love not just Amelia's life, but force an entire industry to confront its deeply rooted prejudices and discriminatory practices. Dr. Amelia Washington had spent her entire career breaking barriers in corporate America. As the first black woman to earn a PhD in biochemical engineering from Georgia Tech, she had worked for 15 years at major pharmaceutical companies before meeting Marcus Washington at a tech conference in Silicon Valley. While Marcus was building his software empire, Amelia had established herself as one of the leading researchers in sustainable energy technology, holding over 30 patents and serving on the boards of several Fortune 500 companies. Together, they had become one of the most influential power couples in American business, but Amelia had always maintained her commitment to education and mentorship, preferring to dress casually and focus on substance over appearance. Their 25th wedding anniversary was approaching, and Marcus had surprised Amelia with a second honeymoon trip to Paris, just like their original honeymoon 25 years earlier. He had suggested she treat herself to something special for the trip, something that would reflect the incredible woman she had become and the success they had built together. Marcus had always been proud of Amelia's accomplishments, often saying that her brilliant mind and generous heart were worth more than all his business success combined. He wanted her to have something beautiful that would remind her every day how much she was loved and valued. That's what brought Amelia to Prestige Fine Jewelry on that humid Tuesday morning in August. She had researched the store extensively, reading about their reputation for exceptional craftsmanship and personalized service. The store was located in one of Atlanta's most exclusive shopping districts, known for catering to celebrities, athletes, and business leaders. What Amelia didn't know was that despite their prestigious reputation, Prestige Fine Jewelry had been operating with a systematic pattern of racial discrimination that had been carefully hidden from public view for years. Amelia entered the store at exactly 11:30 in the morning, dressed in her typical professional casual attire, a navy blue sundress, comfortable sandals, and carrying the canvas tote bag she used for her daily commute to the research lab. The store was elegantly appointed with Italian marble floors, French crystal chandeliers, and security cameras positioned throughout the showroom. Other customers were browsing quietly, most appearing to be well-dressed white women accompanied by attentive sales associates. Amelia approached the main reception desk, where a young white woman named Brittany was organizing paperwork. waiting politely to be acknowledged while admiring the beautiful engagement rings displayed in the nearest case. When Brittany finally looked up at Amelia, her expression immediately shifted from professional politeness to barely concealed suspicion. She did not offer the warm greeting that Amelia had observed her giving to previous customers, nor did she ask how she could help. Instead, Brittany simply stared at Amelia with a questioning look, as if wondering why she was there. When Amelia explained that she was looking for an anniversary gift, perhaps a diamond necklace or bracelet in the $20,000 to $30,000 range, Brittany's response was swift and dismissive. She suggested that Amelia might want to try the department store jewelry counter at the mall, as their pieces were more accessible and better suited to different budgets. The coded language was unmistakable, but Amelia, ever professional, maintained her composure and politely asked to see a few pieces to get an idea of their selection. What happened next would later be captured on multiple security cameras, providing crucial evidence for the federal civil rights investigation that would follow. Brittany reluctantly agreed to show Amelia a few items, but her body language and tone made it clear that she considered this an unwelcome interruption to her day. She brought out what she described as their starter pieces, jewelry that was clearly from a lower-priced collection, while making comments about how these prices might be more realistic for Amelia's situation. Other employees began to take notice of the interaction, and Amelia could feel their eyes on her as she examined the jewelry. She overheard whispered conversations between staff members with phrases like, "She doesn't look like she belongs here," and "probably just window shopping," clearly audible. The hostility was palpable, but Amelia continued to maintain her dignity, hoping that professional behavior would overcome their obvious prejudices. She asked specific questions about the craftsmanship and origins of the stones, demonstrating knowledge that should have indicated her serious intent to purchase, but the staff's attitude remained unchanged. The situation escalated dramatically when Amelia asked to see a particular diamond tennis bracelet displayed in the main showcase. The piece was priced at $45,000, and Brittany's response was immediate and humiliating. She loudly announced that the bracelet was probably not in your price range, and suggested that Amelia was wasting everyone's time by looking at pieces she couldn't afford. The comment was loud enough for other customers to hear, and Amelia felt the familiar sting of racial prejudice that she had faced throughout her career, despite her impressive credentials and substantial wealth. When Amelia calmly requested to speak with a manager, the situation went from bad to worse. Store manager Kevin Patterson arrived with an attitude that made it immediately clear he had no intention of providing customer service. He looked Amelia up and down with obvious disdain, taking in her casual dress and canvas bag, and informed her that prestige fine jewelry served a very exclusive clientele and maintained certain standards for their customers. The coded language was unmistakable. He was telling her that she didn't belong in his store because of her race, and he wasn't even trying to hide his discrimination behind polite euphemisms. But Patterson wasn't finished with his humiliation of Dr. Amelia Washington. He went on to explain that their jewelry was investment grade and required customers who could appreciate the finer things in life, implying that as a black woman, Amelia lacked the sophistication to understand luxury goods. He suggested that she would be more comfortable at stores that catered to her kind of customer, a phrase that made his racial bias crystal clear. Other customers had stopped their own shopping to watch the confrontation, some looking uncomfortable with what they were witnessing, but none speaking up to defend Amelia. The final insult came when Patterson, apparently concerned that Amelia might be planning to shoplift, called security to escort her out of the store. 2 security guards approached Dr. Amelia Washington, a woman who held advanced degrees from prestigious universities, sat on corporate boards, and had been featured on the cover of Fortune magazine, and treated her like a criminal. In front of a store full of customers, she was asked to open her bag for inspection, and was then escorted to the door while Patterson loudly announced that they had procedures for dealing with problematic customers. As Amelia was being escorted out, she turned to Patterson and said with quiet dignity, "You have no idea who you're dealing with, and you're about to find out." It wasn't a threat, but rather a statement of fact that would prove prophetic in ways that Patterson couldn't possibly imagine. She left the store with her head held high, but her heart was breaking, not just from the personal humiliation, but from the realization that despite all her success and achievements, she was still being judged solely by the color of her skin. Amelia's first call wasn't to a lawyer or the police, though both would become involved soon enough. Instead, she called her husband Marcus, who was in meetings at his headquarters in Silicon Valley. When she tearfully recounted what had happened at Prestige Fine Jewelry, Marcus's response was immediate and decisive. As one of the most successful black entrepreneurs in America, Marcus had faced his share of discrimination, but he had also built the resources and connections to fight back effectively. What he told Amelia next would set in motion a series of events that would expose the ugly truth about racial discrimination in luxury retail. Marcus revealed that he had been funding a civil rights organization called the Retail Justice Project, which had been quietly investigating discriminatory practices at high-end stores across the country. They had been building cases against several major retailers, but they needed more evidence to establish patterns of systematic discrimination. Amelia's experience, captured on security cameras and witnessed by multiple customers, could provide the breakthrough they needed to take legal action not just against Prestige Fine Jewelry, but against their entire corporate parent company. Within 2 hours of Amelia's phone call, Marcus had activated a network of resources that would make Prestige Fine Jewelry regret their treatment of his wife. He immediately retained the services of Johnson, Williams Associates, one of the most prestigious civil rights law firms in the country, led by attorney Sarah Johnson, who had won landmark discrimination cases against major corporations. He also contacted investigative journalist Michael Torres from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, who had been working on a series about discrimination in luxury retail and was eager to expose stores that were violating civil rights laws. But the most significant call Marcus made was to FBI Special Agent Lisa Chen, who headed the Bureau's Civil Rights Enforcement Division in Atlanta. Agent Chen had been investigating complaints about discriminatory practices in Atlanta's luxury retail district for over a year, but she needed concrete evidence to build federal cases. Amelia's experience provided exactly the kind of documented discrimination that could trigger a comprehensive federal investigation under the Civil Rights Act, potentially exposing systematic violations that could result in criminal charges and massive financial penalties. The plan that emerged from these conversations was comprehensive and designed to expose the full scope of Prestige Fine Jewelry's discriminatory practices. Amelia would return to the store, but this time she would be properly dressed in designer clothes and accompanied by a white business associate who would pose as her assistant. This would allow them to observe firsthand how differently she was treated when her appearance conformed to the store's expectations. Hidden cameras and recording devices would capture everything, providing evidence that could be used in both criminal and civil proceedings. But before the undercover operation could begin, Agent Chen's investigation revealed that Prestige Fine Jewelry's discrimination went far deeper than one incident. The FBI had been monitoring complaints about the store for months, and a pattern was emerging that suggested systematic exclusion of black customers, coded language used by employees to discourage minority shoppers, and training materials that taught staff to profile customers based on appearance and perceived economic status. The store was allegedly using these discriminatory practices as part of a broader business model designed to maintain an exclusive customer base. The investigation also uncovered financial irregularities that suggested the store might be engaged in activities beyond discrimination. Federal agents discovered evidence of potential tax evasion, insurance fraud, and money laundering, all connected to their practice of maintaining two sets of books, one for their legitimate customers and another for their cash transactions with clients who wanted to avoid documentation. The discrimination wasn't just morally wrong. It was potentially part of a larger criminal enterprise designed to hide illegal financial activities. Meanwhile, attorney Sarah Johnson was building a civil rights case that would seek not just damages for Amelia's humiliation, but systematic changes in how luxury retailers train their staff and interact with customers. Her research revealed that Prestige Fine Jewelry was owned by Luxury Retail Holdings, a conglomerate that operated similar stores in 12 states. If they could prove that the discrimination was part of a company-wide policy, they could potentially shut down the entire operation and recover damages for hundreds of victims across the country. The media investigation led by Michael Torres was uncovering its own disturbing evidence. Through interviews with former employees, Torres learned that prestige fine jewelry had formal policies that were clearly discriminatory, including instructions to sales staff about which customers to prioritize and which to discourage. The store manager Kevin Patterson had allegedly sent emails to staff with explicit instructions about profiling customers based on race, age, and appearance. These communications would later become key evidence in the federal prosecution. 3 days after Amelia's initial humiliation, she returned to Prestige Fine Jewelry for the undercover operation. This time, she was dressed in a designer suit from Armani, carrying a Hermes handbag, and wearing diamond earrings worth more than most people's annual salaries. She was accompanied by Jennifer Walsh, a white attorney from Sarah Johnson's firm who posed as her personal shopping assistant. The transformation was remarkable, and the contrast in treatment would provide some of the most damning evidence in the entire case. The difference in how Amelia was treated was immediate and shocking. Brittany, the same employee who had dismissed her days earlier, now welcomed her with enthusiastic professionalism, offering champagne and promising exclusive access to pieces that were reserved for our most valued clients. Kevin Patterson personally escorted them through the store, boasting about their celebrity clientele and exclusive inventory. Neither employee recognized Amelia as the woman they had humiliated just 3 days earlier, proving that their discrimination was based purely on superficial judgments about her appearance and perceived wealth. Over the course of 3 hours, the hidden cameras captured extensive evidence of discriminatory behavior. While Amelia was receiving VIP treatment, other black customers who entered the store were subjected to the same dismissive treatment she had originally experienced. A young black couple looking for engagement rings were told that their starter rings began at prices far higher than what the couple had requested. An elderly black man shopping for his wife's birthday gift was followed by security throughout his visit and ultimately discouraged from making any purchases. The recorded conversations between employees were equally damning. Staff members openly discussed their policies for managing different types of customers, using coded language that made their racial bias clear. Patterson was captured on audio explaining to a new employee how to identify customers who were likely to cause problems and how to discourage them from spending too much time in the store. The systematic nature of the discrimination was undeniable, and every word was being recorded for use in the federal prosecution. But perhaps the most shocking discovery came when Patterson, trying to impress his wealthy new customers, began revealing details about the store's financial practices. He explained how they could help customers make purchases that would be difficult for tax authorities to trace, how they maintained relationships with appraisers who would inflate values for insurance purposes, and how they could facilitate transactions that would help customers hide assets from various authorities. What he was describing was a comprehensive money laundering and tax evasion operation, and every detail was being recorded by FBI equipment. The federal investigation that intensified following Amelia's undercover visit revealed the true scope of Prestige Fine Jewelry's criminal activities. Financial records seized through court orders showed millions of dollars in suspicious transactions, with money flowing through offshore accounts controlled by the parent company. The store had been facilitating tax evasion for wealthy clients while simultaneously discriminating against potential customers based on race. The combination of civil rights violations and financial crimes would ultimately result in federal charges that could shut down the entire operation. The human cost of their discrimination was becoming increasingly clear as FBI agents interviewed dozens of customers who had been mistreated based on their race. Many of these customers were successful professionals, business owners, and celebrities who had been denied service simply because they were black. The pattern of discrimination was so systematic that it was clear the company had deliberately chosen to exclude black customers as a matter of policy, violating both federal civil rights laws and basic human decency. Amelia's role in the investigation expanded as federal agents recognized her unique qualifications to help understand the full scope of the criminal enterprise. Her background in biochemical engineering and her experience serving on corporate boards gave her insights into complex financial structures that proved invaluable in tracing the company's money laundering operations. She worked closely with FBI financial crimes specialists to unravel the sophisticated methods Prestige Fine Jewelry used to hide their illegal activities from federal regulators. The takedown, when it finally came, was swift and comprehensive. On a busy Friday afternoon, federal agents simultaneously raided Prestige Fine Jewelry and 8 related businesses across 4 states, seizing computers, financial records, and over $10 million worth of jewelry and other assets. The coordination required dozens of agents and involved cooperation between the FBI, IRS, and local law enforcement agencies. Customers who were in the Atlanta store during the raid watched in shock as Kevin Patterson and Brittany were led away in handcuffs. Kevin Patterson was charged with orchestrating a money laundering scheme, multiple counts of civil rights violations, conspiracy to commit tax evasion, and fraud related to insurance claims. Brittany and 4 other employees faced charges related to civil rights violations and conspiracy to commit fraud. The parent company's executives, who had been operating the discriminatory policies from their corporate headquarters in New York, were arrested on federal conspiracy charges that could result in decades in prison. The legal proceedings that followed were extensive and groundbreaking. Federal prosecutors presented evidence of over $150 million in money laundering activities, systematic civil rights violations affecting hundreds of customers, and tax evasion schemes that had cost federal and state governments millions in lost revenue. The case became a landmark in prosecuting both financial crimes and discriminatory business practices, with Amelia's testimony serving as the emotional centerpiece that reminded everyone of the human cost of such systematic racism. Attorney Sarah Johnson's civil rights lawsuit was equally comprehensive, seeking damages not just for Amelia, but for a class of over 300 customers who had been discriminated against over the previous 5 years. The lawsuit demanded not only financial compensation, but systematic changes in how luxury retailers train their staff, monitor for discriminatory practices, and ensure equal treatment for all customers, regardless of race or appearance. The case attracted national attention and became a rallying point for civil rights advocates across the country. The media coverage led by Michael Torres exposed the ugly reality of discrimination in luxury retail, sparking a national conversation about racism in American business. His investigative series revealed that Prestige Fine Jewelry was not an isolated case, but part of a broader pattern of discrimination that affected luxury retailers across the country. The coverage led to congressional hearings, federal investigations of other retailers, and ultimately to new legislation strengthening civil rights protections in commercial settings. The sentences, when they were finally handed down, reflected the severity of both the financial crimes and the civil rights violations. Kevin Patterson received 15 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay over $30 million in restitution to victims of both the discrimination and the financial fraud. Brittany and the other employees received sentences ranging from 3 to 7 years, along with substantial fines and community service requirements that included mandatory diversity training and civil rights education. The parent company executives received the harshest sentences, with CEO Richard Sterling getting 22 years in prison and forfeiture of all assets connected to the criminal enterprise. The company itself was dissolved, its assets liquidated to pay restitution to victims and fund civil rights enforcement programs. Prestige Fine Jewelry was permanently shut down, and the building was eventually sold to a nonprofit organization that converted it into a civil rights education center. The civil rights lawsuit resulted in a settlement of over $50 million, with individual payouts to victims ranging from $50,000 to $2 million depending on the severity of the discrimination they had experienced. But more importantly, the settlement included mandatory changes to how luxury retailers operate, including comprehensive diversity training, monitoring systems to detect discriminatory practices, and regular civil rights audits conducted by independent organizations. Amelia's personal transformation through this experience was remarkable. The accomplished scientist and corporate board member had discovered a new calling as a civil rights advocate, using her platform and resources to fight discrimination wherever it occurred. She testified before Congress about the reality of racial discrimination in American business, speaking eloquently about how prejudice affects not just individual victims, but entire communities and the broader economy. The Amelia Washington Foundation, established with a portion of the lawsuit settlement, became a leading force in fighting retail discrimination and supporting Black-owned businesses. The foundation funded studies showing that discriminatory practices in retail cost the economy billions of dollars annually by excluding potential customers and limiting market growth. They also provided legal support for discrimination victims and funded diversity training programs for retail employees across the country. The personal impact on Marcus and Amelia's relationship was profound and positive. The experience of fighting injustice together had strengthened their bond and given them a shared mission that went beyond their business success. Marcus often said that watching Amelia transform from victim to victorious advocate had made him love and admire her even more than he had during their first 25 years of marriage. They decided to use their wealth and influence not just for their own success, but to create opportunities for others who face the same discrimination they had experienced. The anniversary gift that had originally brought Amelia to prestige fine jewelry was eventually created by a Black-owned jewelry company in Atlanta. The custom necklace, designed by master craftsman James Wilson, incorporated elements that celebrated both Amelia's scientific achievements and her civil rights advocacy. The piece became a symbol not just of her marriage to Marcus, but of her journey from victim to victor in the fight against racial discrimination. The federal investigation that began with Amelia's experience ultimately led to investigations of over 40 luxury retailers across the country. The Retail Justice Project, funded by Marcus and other wealthy donors, became a permanent organization dedicated to fighting discrimination in commercial settings. Their work led to hundreds of successful civil rights cases, changes in federal law, and a fundamental shift in how luxury retailers train their staff and interact with customers of all backgrounds. 5 years after that humiliating day at Prestige Fine Jewelry, Dr. Amelia Washington reflected on how the experience had changed both her life and the broader fight for civil rights. She had discovered that her scientific training in problem-solving and systematic analysis could be applied to fighting social injustice. The same skills that had made her successful in biochemical engineering, careful observation, methodical data collection, and rigorous analysis, had proven invaluable in exposing and combating discrimination. The building that once housed Prestige Fine Jewelry now serves as the Atlanta Civil Rights Education Center, funded by the Washington Foundation and operated in partnership with several historically Black colleges and universities. The marble floors and crystal chandeliers remain, but they now illuminate displays about the ongoing fight for civil rights and the importance of treating all people with dignity and respect, regardless of their race or appearance. Amelia often visits the center, quietly observing the educational programs she has funded and the young people learning about civil rights history. She still dresses modestly when she's working in her research lab, still carries a canvas tote bag when she's running errands, and still faces occasional discrimination from people who judge her by her appearance rather than her achievements. But now she carries herself with the confidence of someone who has faced injustice and emerged victorious, someone who has turned personal pain into a powerful force for positive change. The story of Dr. Amelia Washington and Prestige Fine Jewelry became more than just a case study in justice served. It became a reminder that racism still exists in American business, that discrimination has costs beyond the immediate harm to victims, and that sometimes the most unlikely encounters can become catalysts for systematic change. In a world where Black professionals still face prejudice despite their achievements, Amelia's story stands as a testament to the importance of fighting back against discrimination and using privilege and resources to protect others who face similar challenges. The legacy of that August morning continues to grow through the work of the Washington Foundation and the dozens of civil rights cases it has funded. The federal legislation inspired by Amelia's testimony has strengthened protections against retail discrimination and made it easier for victims to seek justice. The diversity training programs developed in response to the case have been implemented by major retailers across the country, helping to prevent the kind of systematic discrimination that prestige fine jewelry practiced. As Amelia often says in her speeches to young professionals, the most expensive thing in that jewelry store wasn't any diamond or precious metal. It was the cost of treating another human being with disrespect based on the color of their skin. That cost, as prestige fine jewelry learned too late, can include federal prison sentences, financial ruin, and the complete destruction of a business empire built on discrimination. But from that expensive lesson came something invaluable, a renewed commitment to civil rights, equality, and the fundamental principle that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their race, appearance, or the bag they choose to carry.